There are two tales waiting for you, told one after the other by an odd set of two. So prepare yourself, dear one, because this is Drops of Darkness.
Hello, I'm Anodyne, and welcome to our show, where every week we give you an original dark fiction story along with a true paranormal experience. For today's episode, I wrote something a little longer than usual for you. A story titled The Invitation that was fueled by a childhood legend we've all heard of, and most of us even participated in. After that, Cameron's got a story that might be one of my favorites so far. A real-life encounter with a Wendigo. As always, thank you for listening, and if you enjoy what we do here in our weird little production, it would be great if you could share the show and give us a follow and maybe even leave us a review. It helps more than you know. Alright, enough of all that. Stranger and someone are waiting. I am Stranger, and I tell only fantasies. Whenever your world has a grip on your throat, I am there, waiting to unleash the monsters that sleep in my mind, so that they may remind you that you have sharp teeth and claws of your own. First, there was an uncomfortable twist, followed by a little wet pop, and then it was over. Emily bounced in her seat at the back of the school bus and watched her tiny blood-covered tooth dance around in her palm. She probed the empty space between her teeth with her tongue. It tasted like pennies. "See, I told you it wouldn't hurt," cheered her friend with a wide, gappy smile. Penelope had a great deal of experience when it came to losing teeth, and under her expert guidance, Emily was finally brave enough to reach in and yank out the tooth that had been hanging by a gummy thread for nearly a week. "How much do you think you're going to get for it?" Penelope asked over the bus's screeching brakes. Emily tipped the shiny tooth into the pocket on her shirt as they pulled up to their stop. She slung her pink and purple backpack over her shoulder. "How much am I going to get for what?" she asked. "Your tooth, from the Tooth Fairy." Shock filled Penelope's freckled face that it was even a question. "I got a $10 bill for my first tooth, and then $5 for all the ones after that. You can tell the money's from the Tooth Fairy because it's got glitter on it." "There's a fairy that buys your teeth?" Emily was suspicious. She knew money was a very hard thing to get, even for grown-ups. But she couldn't help feeling a flush of excitement, because suddenly, the little lump in her pocket became precious and valuable cargo, and a world of $10 possibilities flashed through her 6-year-old mind. "You know Mom and Dad just spray it with sparkly hairspray, right?" Penelope's older sister stepped off the bus behind them, interrupting Emily's hesitant daydreams with a mixture of boredom and snark in her question. "Like after the Tooth Fairy leaves under my pillow?" Now it was Penelope who was suspicious, and rightfully so. 13-year-olds were rarely trustworthy, and Penelope's older sister was far from the exception. "No, before they traded out for your gross tooth, stupid. There's no such thing as a Tooth Fairy. Mom's got bags with our teeth in them with our old baby books. It's weird." "Liar. The Tooth Fairy is real. You're just saying that because your ugly, crooked teeth aren't worth $10 like mine." Emily walked in silence as the two sisters bickered back and forth. Her hopes dashed. It would make much more sense that it was Penelope's parents behind her tooth-related fortunes, and she doubted her mom would bother with such a silly idea. In her home, there was less silliness than there was money, and they rarely had money. "Okay, so before you go to bed tonight, put the tooth under your pillow. Then when you wake up, there will be money, I promise," Penelope said, walking backwards up her family's wide driveway. Emily looked up at her friend's sister, who rolled their eyes at the both of them, before letting the door slam behind her. "Don't listen to my sister. She's just a asshole." Penelope whispered the last word like she thought God herself was listening. "But don't tell her I said that. Oh, I almost forgot. Don't try to stay up to see her. Mom says the Tooth Fairy can't leave you anything if you're watching." Emily waved goodbye to her friend and walked down the street towards her house. It wasn't much farther down the road, but the houses already looked much different than Penelope's. The driveways were all cracked, with thick clumps of grass pushing through the jagged pieces of cement. The windows stayed shut. The front lawns didn't have that same neat crisscrossing patterns in the grass. The only kids that came out to play were much older than her, and the games they played scared her. The only thing that Emily liked about her end of the street were the woods. All the trees around Penelope's house had thin little trunks and no good branches for climbing, and they didn't block out the sun the same way the wild-looking trees behind her house did. She pretended it was a magical forest, filled with all sorts of wonderful things, hidden just beyond her tiny backyard. Things like unicorns and centaurs and gnomes, and especially fairies. Sometimes, like when her mom didn't come home for the night, she imagined them out there, silently watching her, and it made her feel less afraid. She walked up the crooked steps to her front door, fished around under the doormat for the key, and plugged it into the lock, which ended up being unlocked anyway. The house was quiet and empty. She opened the fridge, hoping for a snack, but all she found was a brown lump of ground beef on a black styrofoam tray, the same one she'd tried throwing out the day before. But the red puddle it sat in was sticky, and it wouldn't budge, no matter how hard she pulled. The clock on the stove only read 4:15, but since there would be no dinner, Emily knew it was better to just go to bed. She usually hated the nights she went to bed hungry, but as she pulled the little red-crusted tooth out of her pocket, she felt something else. Excitement? Fear? Maybe hope? The little girl couldn't be sure. Feelings are hard, especially when there's more than one. The pajamas she wore the night before were still laid out neatly at the foot of her bed, right where she left them. They were a little too small, but they were soft and fit well enough. She slipped into them and crawled into bed. The sun wouldn't set for a few hours, but thanks to the woods outside Emily's window, it was always dark enough to fall asleep. She shoved the tooth under her thin pillow and clamped her eyes closed, remembering what Penelope said about watching, and she didn't want to risk missing out. It was pitch black outside when the window started to open. Emily lifted her face out of the cold puddle of drool on her pillow as a pair of strange-looking hands pushed up on the glass. The wooden frame groaned at the pressure, but slowly, the gap between the sill and the bottom of the window grew wider. Long, spindly fingers slipped through it, and muddy, torn fingernails scraped against her bedroom walls. "I'd like to come in." All Emily could see of the creature's face outside her window was its eyes. 2 spots in the dark, reflecting a yellowish-green glow, pointed right at her. "That's fine," Emily said, propping herself up on her elbow. "Not while you're watching," said the creature. Emily turned over and laid back down. After a few seconds of silence, she heard the window slide open the rest of the way. The creature crawled inside. It was trying to be quiet, but Emily could still hear its legs dragging across the windowsill, followed by a soft thud on the carpet. Then she felt its fingers slip under her pillow. "What do you do with them? The teeth?" Emily asked, her eyes planted firmly on the knob on the closet door. It is not what is left that matters. It is the leaving. You left an offering. It was unclaimed, so I came. Emily thought for a moment. Is there something else you'd like more than a tooth? I am like you, hungry. Emily pulled back the covers, careful to keep her eyes forward, and ran down the hall to the kitchen. She opened the fridge. The tray wasn't going anywhere, so she peeled back what was left of the plastic wrap and picked up the brown lump of meat in her hand. It was cold, and it squeezed through her fingers as she went back to her room. When she got to her door, she turned around, stuck the meat out behind her, and walked backwards towards her bed. I'm not sure if you want this. I can't eat it, but maybe you can. She felt it take a bite of the rancid meat. As the creature ate, Emily felt its nose, lips, and teeth caress her sticky hand. Why can't I look at you? She asked. Because you would not like what you see. Once it finished its meal, the creature asked the girl what she'd like in return. It offered her many things, most of which scared her the same way she was scared of the older kids' games. They were things that she did not understand. She had no use for her enemy's head, and she didn't know anyone that she'd like brought back from the dead. But what she did know was that her tooth had been just as good as Penelope's, so she asked for $10. As you wish, said the tooth fairy. It gagged, and it hacked, until something heavy splashed onto the carpet. Now, sleep. Emily pulled the covers up to her chin, laid her head back down on the pillow, and closed her eyes. On the bus the next morning, Penelope couldn't contain her surprise when Emily pulled out the gold coin. It was the size of their palm and etched in symbols they could not understand. Emily'd been so excited that morning when she checked under her pillow, but as she got ready for school on an empty stomach, in an empty house, that she was left in by an empty parent who seemed more enemy than mother. Emily thought about what else the creature had offered. She wondered if she made the right choice. But as her tongue pushed against the other loose tooth in her mouth, she figured she'd just ask her new friend for that favor the next time she left a tooth under her pillow.
Hello, everyone. In between stories, we like to highlight a cause that is worth our collective attention. It's Pride Month, and we want to give a huge shout out to Lambda Legal, an incredible nonprofit that has been fighting for the civil rights of LGBTQ plus individuals and everyone living with HIV for over 40 years. From landmark court cases to advocating for policy changes, Lambda Legal is on the front lines ensuring equality and justice for all. You can find out more and donate at www.lambdalegal.org or from the link on our website at dropsofdarkness.com. Now, back into the shadows we go. I am someone, and I tell only truth. Whenever something slithers through the barrier between worlds, I am there, not to stop them, but to watch them and remind you of the countless terrors your kind has survived, all on their own. This story was submitted by Bleeding Souls, whose Reddit handle is listed in the episode's description. When I was younger, around 13 or so, me and my older brother, who at the time was 16, were walking home from kind of like a youth center where basically just do a bunch of activities. This was in October or so, and it was around 10 p.m. Since the youth center wasn't far from home, we decided to just walk instead of catching the bus. If we were to catch the bus, we would have had to wait for like an hour. We live kind of far away from the city on a farm with 3 to 4 neighbors. So to get home, we had to walk on a big road. But since it was pretty late, we figured no cars would be out. This night, we had a horror night at the youth center. Basically, we played horror games and watched scary movies. I'll skip the boring shit. When we were at the bus stop outside of our farm, around 200 meters or so from the house, we heard footsteps. Mind you, this bus stop is surrounded by fields, where during the fall, they grow corn. My brother stopped and turned around. I noticed he stopped walking, so I turned around to ask him why he'd stopped. I look at my brother, who's standing completely still with his back against me. And what I'm about to say is so bizarre, and I don't care if you believe me or not, but I honestly don't fucking care. I look over my brother's shoulder, and what I see still horrifies me to this day. I see a moose, skinned and bloody, standing on 2 legs. It had completely white eyes, and it was standing there, staring at my brother. I can hear my brother whisper my name and telling me to run on his command. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, horrified and paralyzed from fear. I don't remember what my brother said, but he all of a sudden turned around, grabbed my arm, and started running. I've never run that fast in my entire life. I've never seen my brother that scared either. We ran all the way back home, and the whole time I could hear quick footsteps behind us, but I knew better than to look back. When we got home, my brother was crying. He was crying hysterically, and he had told my mom what had happened. At that time, me and my brother shared a room, and my bed was at the window while his was closer to the door. We didn't sleep that much that night, and there's 2 reasons. Reason number 1, we had seen a fucking moose standing on 2 legs chasing us. And number 2, that whole night, we could hear scratching on the wall to our bedroom from outside and footsteps as if a dog was running around. Our neighbors don't have any animals, and we lived on the 2nd floor. To this day, my brother has never been willing to talk about what happened that night. My whole life, I've been seeing and hearing weird shit, but nothing like this. After that night, I can't walk to the bus stop alone, even if it's in the middle of the day. Today, we live next door, but still, I believe the whole farm is haunted.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Drops of Darkness, which is written, voiced, and produced by Anodyne Vaughn and Cameron Helkuik. If you enjoyed your drift into the shadows, help keep the stories alive by sharing the show, leaving a review, and if you really want to earn the favor of these dark storytellers, tether yourself to their world by tapping subscribe. If you have a true paranormal story of your own that you'd like to be read by someone, you can make the offering to submissions@dropsofdarkness.com or through the form on our website. Until next time, dear one, and remember, when the darkness looks your way, hold its gate.